All right. Hi, everyone. So today I need to have a really important conversation. Um, I just want to start with it hurts me that I have to do this. I'm extremely disappointed that I have to do this. So there's a couple reasons why I never spoke out publicly about what happened with Pamela and I. But I'm at a point right now that I don't have a choice but to publicly put this information out there, and I will explain to you why. I'm going to start with showing you a letter all the way back from May because I feel like that will give context to everything that I'm going to tell you. Um, but before I get into that, just to tell you a little bit about what's going on is it's been brought to my attention that, Pamela has been running this months long smear campaign on the movement and on me. So the reality of it is I have to set the record straight. And I just want everyone to know this. I don't want to do this. Okay. Like in no way, shape, or form did I ever want to do this at all. But I have to. I'm at a point that I don't have a choice because of the level of a smear campaign that she is running. So I have to sit there and communicate this to everyone. So I'm going to start off by showing you a letter that was written to our attorneys a while ago so you can understand where the relationship breakdown came from with Pamela and I and why that happened. Because I feel like that is the healthiest thing to do right now. Okay. So this letter is dated May 29th, 2020. Okay. So it says rescindment of agreement offer. The attorneys are on here and you can see Pamela's on this letter as well. So this was about, so for those of you who don't know, Pamela was living with me. Pamela was an inpatient and she was there for a couple months. So she had told me that she was financially struggling and, I felt like I wanted to help her. Like I wanted to help her get on the right foot and I wanted to, help her grow and develop. And there's a lot of areas where I made mistakes, right? And one of the key mistakes that I made at the early on, right? And the movement was such a baby and you learn through trial and error. So like one of the lessons that I had to learn and I had to learn the very hard way and was the fact that like I did not listen to DQ Bay and Jessica Durantes. So when they were on board in the movement, they had come to me repeatedly and had told me that they had concerns about Pamela. And I felt that like I dismissed a lot of those concerns because at that point, I didn't feel like they were valid, right? And that's a lesson I learned, right? I learned that people's concerns are valid and there's reasons for them. So I definitely owe them an apology for the fact that I didn't listen to them the way that I needed to. And I am genuinely sorry that I didn't take deeper consideration into how they were feeling because there was a lot of conflict between Jessica, D, and Pamela. Like there was a lot of conflict. And that conflict, like it was just snowballing out of control, but I kept trying to manage it, thinking that I could bring back harmony to everyone. And realistically, like I was just so at a point with the movement of like grow, develop, like where my mindset was at the time. I didn't realize how important it was at that time in the movement to really understand everyone's background and their ideologies and their perceptions, right? And why the root of these conflicts. At that point, I was just trying to manage conflict and keep the movement going. And I was doing the best that I could at that time. Like I was also brand new to doing this. So it was a learning curve for me as well, while I was going through this. And, the biggest mistake that I made and the biggest regret that I have that I live with was not listening to their feedback early on because they gave me feedback numerous times to basically terminate Pamela from the movement. I didn't listen to them, and that conflict snowballed in Washington, D.C. So that's all the stuff that none of you saw. And when we got to Washington, D.C., huge fights broke out between Pamela and Jessica and Deidre. And when those fights broke out, like again, I was trying to manage conflict and it was just not working. And and it was Dee's intuition. And like at that, like I said, at that point, I was just thinking really logically. Like I wasn't thinking about these emotional components and the like validity behind intuition. And that is a mistake that I made, right? And it is a regret that I have. So because, her intuition is strong, and at that time, like my mindset was just in a different place, right? And again, I'm human. So like I'm learning going through this wave. And it's something I regret. And I wish that I had listened to them. And I think that they deserve to hear that. Because I feel that if I had really listened to what they said early on, I would not be here doing this. And honestly, like and just so you know, I felt like this for a while, but so much stuff has been going on with the movement, and at the same time, just other things that are going on. So it's like as time goes on, it was like I was trying to put it past, like just move on and let this go. The issue is I can't let it go because what's happening right now has to get addressed. So now I'm in a position that I have to talk about this. So I'm thankful in one part to talk about this, but in another, it like severely hurts me because I've not like I would never want to have to do what I'm doing right now. Like not the apology part, the piece of having to communicate the behind the scenes situations that happened with Pamela that led to where we are now and this smear campaign that she's running. So I have to talk about this so everyone understands and can connect the dots to what's happening, because me not saying anything is making it look like I'm hiding stuff. And a lot of the reasons why I didn't say some stuff is because another volunteer was involved in why Pamela is no longer part of the movement. And that leads to also her like substance abuse issues as to why she's no longer part of the movement. So I need to put all that in perspective, but these are not things that I would ever want to come out and talk about publicly. However, Pamela is running a smear campaign saying that she was groomed into doing nudes when she didn't want to, and that she felt she feels that I'm a sexual predator. So I need to explain all this. I'm very liberal and progressive. We all know that. In terms of sexuality, I encourage everyone to be themselves and what's authentic and to do what you want to do. Behind the scenes, when Pamela was living here, she didn't have, any money or resources to survive. And when that happened, I was trying to help her and lift her up and, give her the tools and resources to help her thrive. And what happened was when she came out of inpatient, was living here, she was doing really well about the first month. And I really like had potential and hope for her. But about a month in, there was just a lot of red flags, like a lot of red flags. I don't want to go into all of them, but there's just so many. The ones I'm going to focus on are really what relates to what's going on now. So what ended up happening at that point was I started seeing red flags where she was going downhill. And I kept talking to her about going to mental health and having conversations with them because I saw a spiral downwards that was happening. And I saw it particularly with substances, right? I saw it with alcohol and marijuana specifically, like the most. And what was happening was like the level of drinking and the level of money that was going into drinking and the level of just marijuana use and it was snowballing into other things, and like it caused an environment where I felt unsafe in my own home. And I had this conversation with her, and I told her this, and I told her what was leading to this, because whenever she didn't have substances or like wasn't high or wasn't drunk, she was ultra aggressive and would come into my personal space and I have PTSD. And I'm someone when if you come into my personal space, like I can freak out on you. So like I had to like leave my house a lot of times and stay out of my own house. And I was like, this isn't gonna work. Like this isn't gonna work because like she's dealing with like severe substance abuse issues and I can't live like this. And I can't run the movement like this. And also like with that happening, also I started to question if she was in the capacity to be able to help me run the movement. So, I went through a point where I was like, man, this sucks because, you know, other people saw these red flags and I didn't see them. And by the time I saw them, it was too late. And I was in a situation that it was unhealthy. It was unhealthy and it was scary for me. So it came down to where it really started to get to a point where I was like, this has to come to an end, is when it came down to, for a couple of months, I was paying all of the bills and taking care of everything. So then we agreed that like, after a couple months, she would get up on her feet. She would help with bills. She would help with her portion. So that way it was more of an equilibrium and we were working together to build movement. And I was at like, that was the hopes and dreams that I had for being really optimistic at that point. Cause I think when anyone starts anything, if you're starting a new business, you're starting a nonprofit, like whatever you're starting, you're always going to shoot for the stars and be optimistic, right? Because that's what motivates you to go forward. And then you find yourself in this leadership role, and now you have to sit there and respond, right? And like respond to obstacles that are happening. And one of the key things that I also had to learn was like people in higher level positions have to have a certain level of functionality. And, if they don't have that level of functionality, those people can be severely harmful to the organization. So what ends up happening is I start realizing that there's a pattern and that she's spending all of her money and resources on alcohol and marijuana. Like that's it. And to the point that it was excessive. So I obviously had multiple conversations with her about it because I thought that maybe she would be responsive and that we could work through this. You know what I mean? And I wanted to be a support system. Like that was important to me too. And that was another mistake that I made, where like I shouldn't have been as empathetic as I was. Like the level of empathy that I was giving her was crossing a boundary that I shouldn't have, right? And that's another lesson that I had to learn along the way. So what this comes down to is that so this gets to a point that like when it came down for her to pay bills, she had to pay a portion of the legal fees, right, that we had because she was named in the lawsuit. So she, and from that point on, everything was covered by me. So it was going to be her first time actually paying anything. And the agreed upon amount that she told the attorneys that she would pay, she didn't pay that. And what happened was I didn't know that happened until the attorney started emailing me because at that point, like she committed to paying the attorney's fees. So when that happened, and they reached out to me, they were basically like, hey, you're gonna lose us and you're not gonna have legal services if you don't pay us in the next 10 days because Pamela didn't pay the entire bill. And I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, she paid 1/3 of the bill. She didn't pay the rest. And I'm like, I've been covering all the bills for these months, been covering everything. Asked her to cover nothing other than this one bill for her contribution. So what ends up happening is I find this out, and then they basically are like, now your bill's late, and you're not going to have legal services within a couple of days. So now I have like a massive bill that I'm like, what? So like obviously I had a conversation with her about like, hey, let's put this in perspective. You've been living here and like you're not paying for anything. You're not paying for anything. And I've been taking care of you and I've been helping you. And now you have a responsibility and like you didn't even communicate with me. So we have this conversation and now she's telling me that the reason she didn't want to have that conversation is she's uncomfortable talking about money. And I'm like, let's break this down a little bit more. Like, is it more about money or is it that you're struggling with substance abuse habits and you don't want to talk about that? Because like I was trying to bring that up, but obviously that turned into a fight. So then she's like, I'll get you the money. I'll get you the money. And I'm like, no, because now at this point, I'm like, if you don't have money, I'm concerned about where you're going to get it from. So, I was like, I don't want you to deal with this. And she got really upset at me because she didn't want me to email the attorneys because I then told them I'll take care of it. And I was like, I'll figure it out. I was like, just give me a day or two. And I was like, I'll take care of this. She got mad at me for doing that because she felt her boundaries were disrespected because she wanted time to figure it out and didn't want me to come out and say something to the attorneys, right? And I understand she was feeling ashamed, but at the end of the day, like, this is a money thing, and like this has to get taken care of. So I was like, I'll address it. This turns into a blowout fight with her. And all of a sudden she's like, well, I'm going to get the money from this volunteer. This volunteer said they'll give the money. And I was like, no. I was like, that's not going to happen. And she's like, no, like, I already worked it out with them. Like, they're going to give us the money and like, we'll have it. And I was like, that's not what we're doing, right? Like, we're not going to take money from a volunteer to then pay for this. So I was like, that's not going to happen. So then she's trying to and at that point, I already resolved the payment. Like, I already took care of it. So anyway, what ends up happening is, when that happens, now she's livid. She's livid that I did this. And she feels like I defied her and I'm not giving her a chance to be a partner. And, I'm treating her as she's less than me and she doesn't matter. Like, it turned into this whole blowout argument. And I was like, this is nonsense that this is even happening. Like, you put me in a situation that I had to deal with rapidly to respond to, and now you're like having a fight with me, and now you're talking about getting money from someone else. I'm like, this isn't okay. So basically it got to a position where I was like, this isn't working. You and I are not working. Like, I'm not feeling safe here in terms of like obligations to the organization and moving forward. I don't feel that you're in the capacity to do that. And I was like, and it's a red flag to me that not only did you not pay this bill and not tell me about it, but at the same time, you're going there having this conversation with, someone else about a money issue you're having, and now you're passing the burden on to them. And a lot of our volunteers don't have money like that. So I was like, this is just red flag central. And then on top of it, it was like every time something was on social media and she was engaging, like, it would turn into drama. And I felt like the more she was getting involved in substance use, the more the drama was happening. So it got to a point that I was like, this is just like red flag, red flag, red flag, red flag, right? And when I got to that point, I was like, we got to separate, right? Like, this isn't going to work. So then we agreed to basically for her to take a sabbatical, for her to go on leave, and we would revisit the conversation. Then I find out that she takes a sabbatical and takes it with another volunteer. And then while she's doing that, I find out that she takes $3,000 from that volunteer. And when that happened, I told that volunteer, when I found out about that like neither one of them could be in the movement because those money issues don't need to come to the movement. Like, because you're falling short on your end and now it's turning into a domino effect of money issues. I'm not dealing with that. I'm not dealing with that. I worked in finance for 13 years as a licensed financial advisor. I'm not fucking with that situation. Not going to happen. So at this point, and also remember at this point too, like, I just came out of multiple surgeries. I almost died multiple times. I was sick and I was just recovering at the same time. Like, I had a whole 10-month recovery after I almost died. So like, I'm dealing with this situation happening while physically, mentally, and emotionally, I'm not in a good place. So when all of that happens, when all of this is going down, at this point, I'm like, you guys need to deal with what you're dealing with, and that needs to stay separate from the movement because that's not coming in here. So anyway, when all that happens and they're doing their money transactions back and forth between each other, I find out later on, right? But this is relevant to where I'm going, that Pamela took that $3,000, said she was borrowing it, not even for legal fees. I don't know what it was supposed to be for, but like, they cut some kind of deal. She said she was going to pay the other one back. Apparently she never did. She called the police on the volunteer, like, went to her house, called a volunteer, said that she was going through some kind of harassment. The girl who loaned her the money got arrested, and then Pamela ran away with the money and never like spoke to her again. So that's what happened between the two of them. I find out about this later after the other volunteer then reaches out to me after all that happened. And I was like, I tried to tell you because I was living with her that I saw that she was spiraling downwards. I tried to tell you when she brought this up that it was a red flag. And like she didn't want to hear me out at that point. So I told both of them they needed to leave the movement. So anyway, all of that happens, and later on the other volunteer comes to me and you know told me that she felt bad for not listening to me, but I understood because I made mistakes too, you know what I mean? Getting up to that point I had made mistakes, so like I understood where she was coming from, and I'm like, you know, you win some, you lose some, and you got to take the lessons as they come. So like I just chalked it up to that, and you know left it alone at that point. Then it comes down to, you know, at that point we separate, and you know basically I put Pamela in a position to be forced to resign. Like the way that everything was going, like there was no other option. So she officially the movement, and she asked for an amicable separation, which I agreed to because I did not want it to be public information of what she was dealing with. I did not feel that that needed to be public information, and it was not because of the movement. I felt for her personal well-being, it did not need to be public information. So I felt like I needed to you know like you want to end amicably, let's end this amicably. You move forward, we'll move forward. It is what it is. But A, I was hurt. B, it was like, you know, this sucks that this happened, but I saw no other way to keep the movement going because the way it was going was like it was going to be a shit show and I just wanted no part of it. So to protect the movement and protect the organization, like that we had to separate ways. Like that's just what had to happen for the sake of the movement. And so then what happens is you know, Pamela resigns and then like she starts posting stuff on social media. And when she initially posts stuff on social media, which is, hold on, let me get back to here. So this letter that was written on May 29th so I agreed initially that even though she resigned, I would continue covering her attorney's fees. Because I knew she was spiraling downwards, I wanted her to focus on her mental health. And then the fact that she got into financial issues with another volunteer, I wanted to be supportive. So I talked to her and I spoke to our attorneys and I told them I would cover her attorney's fees. The one stipulation I have is that we remain amicable. That's it. So like you don't talk about me, I don't talk about you. We remain amicable because I felt that that was the best way to protect her mental health. And you know, I know that being in the movement, how stressful it could be to your mental well-being. So I was like, I'll cover your legal expenses. I'll take care of them. However, like we're moving forward on amicable terms. So we came up with an agreement. We agreed to it. We went forward with it. So I thought. All of a sudden, everybody is reaching out to me, asking me what happened and what's going on. And I had gotten into an agreement that I wouldn't say anything. And that was at Pamela's request. I want to make that very clear. That was at her request. And it was also at her request to make sure that nothing goes public and that we don't have these conversations. So I agreed to that. I'm like, I'll cover the attorney's fees. You know, work on yourself, like whatever, because I wanted an amicable separation. So anyway, we do that, and all of a sudden, I'm getting all these messages from people and screenshots, and it's all like, Pamela's saying this, Pamela's doing this, whatever. And there was initially, and this is before her many thousands more that she's posted, but I'm going to show you the domino effect of how this escalated. So what ends up happening is Pamela starts posting, hold on, let me see if I could get, yeah, right here. So Pamela puts this post up, right? How do you expect to run an organization when you can't even get the weed man to come through? So this post in particular that she posted was relating to the fact that she wanted weed and alcohol and I wouldn't get it. And the reason I wouldn't do that was because of everything I just said. Everything I just went over was why I wasn't pursuing that. Like she needed to focus on her mental health and healing. And like she just got out of inpatient. She's been going through substance abuse counseling. So like I was trying to help her not relapse while she was relapsing. So then, while this is happening, I'm like, I'm not gonna get her, I'm not getting her weed. Like, I'm not doing this. But the problem was if she wasn't high or drunk, she was unbearable to live with. And like if she didn't have drugs or alcohol, you know, it was constant harassment. Like she would be up my ass in my face constantly if I wasn't getting her weed, if I wasn't getting her alcohol, if I wasn't getting her what she wanted. And like she would go out of her way to go get what she needed and then like not do anything else. And it's like, so she would get drunk or high and then she wouldn't even be functional. And the next thing you know, it's like she's fighting with people online. It's turning into excess drama. Work's not getting done. It's becoming a distraction. The movement's going downwards. And I'm like, this has to stop. Like, this has to stop. So, like, I was trying to be supportive, but obviously I got to a point that I had to establish boundaries because this wasn't working. And now it's like, do I sacrifice a friendship or do I sacrifice the movement? Because if I keep going with this friendship, the movement's going to go downhill. So like I gotta let this go because it's a huge fucking red flag. And at that point I was like, I'm not getting her stuff. I'm not doing this. And like she's gotta move out and we gotta figure this out. So anyway, that's how things transpire. So she moves out, she starts posting this shit. So now I'm like, you're posting that, but like you're making it look like I can't get weed. Like so now I'm like and like not only that, but like you're also trying to shift the blame as if it's me because I was not entertaining your substance abuse habit. And like, and you're upset that I'm not like entertaining your substance abuse habit, but also you're getting abusive with me for not entertaining your substance abuse habit. So like, obviously I have PTSD. I grew up in an abusive home. Like I'm not dealing with that and I'm paying the bills. Like, no, I'm going to restore my environment and make it safe. Like, yes, I drink from time to time, but like rarely, you know, I smoke weed, but not like on a daily basis all day, every day. So like I use substances, but like lightly to moderately. And I don't ever use them to like rely on them. So obviously that was causing conflict and strife. So anyway, what ends up happening with that is not only does that happen and not only is she posting that, but this was not even the other room, but this is all bottles of alcohol that were in the house from her drinking. And this literally is a couple of days worth of alcohol. And like, this was like 10 out of the 15 bottles, right, that she had in less than a week. So this letter I sent to the attorneys because not only is she not abiding by the agreement that we agreed to, but at the same time, she is also sitting there and like literally lying about what's going on and creating a narrative that's not true. So obviously, it's getting to a point that like I have to say something. So at this point, I rescind paying her legal fees. I'm like, she violated our agreement. I'm not paying her legal fees. Like I'm not taking care of her because not only did I invite her into my home, not only did I pay all of the fucking bills, not only did I take care of everything for her, I tried lifting her up. I tried working with her to get in therapy. I tried keeping everything together and it was falling apart. And like, I just couldn't do all of it. And like, she was the problem. So I had to let her go. And that it was at that point that my regret with Deidre and Jessica started because that was when it resonated to me with what they were trying to communicate with me. And like that's when the dots started to connect for me, right? Again, hindsight's 2020, and that's how we learn. So anyway, what ends up happening at that point is I rescind this agreement. And when this agreement gets rescinded, Pamela throws a tantrum and a half. And she is super, super livid. And hold on. Yeah, like this conversation. So this conversation turns into her saying like, you know, these bottles and so forth were just her doing a project and like, oh, you're saying I owe you money, whatever, blah, 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 the whole nine, right? So like now she's like just going back and forth with me because she wants me to start a fight. So I'm like, I'm just not dealing with this. Like talk to the attorneys, right, about what you want to do and you figure it out. And then like, so then I find out that she stole the money, right? So all that happens. And then when all that went down and that happened, she basically writes me an email back and she's like, if you don't pay my legal fees, she's like, I'm gonna sit there and I'm gonna make all this public and I'm gonna destroy the movement. And I was like, you're threatening me to pay your legal fees after I paid for you living here, after I took care of you, after I tried helping you, after you're smearing my name and saying things that aren't true. And now you're telling me that you're gonna try to like harm the movement. So at this point, I just had enough. So I call the attorneys and I'm like, look, I don't know what her issue is, but I don't know what to do at this point. Like I'm not talking to her because all it's doing is leading to a conflict. So then she asked for something. We were gonna come up with another agreement, right? And she wasn't gonna go forward. She agreed, like she basically was like, all right, I won't do this, we'll resolve it amicably. I don't want problems and I don't want to go forward with this. So I'm like, okay, like that's fine. And that was kind of like how we left things off for a little bit until I went to Texas, right? Everything was fine at that point. I go to Texas, and all of a sudden, when I go to Texas, um, she starts saying that she doesn't want her pictures up anymore. She doesn't want them. And then she starts doing a smear campaign saying she feels exploited. And she like starts saying how she feels um that she was coerced into doing nudes. And I want to explain this. Before we did any nudes, we spoke to the attorneys about this on 4 fucking occasions. They were involved in these conversations. We didn't just do this. We didn't just talk, like, we didn't just do this. Like, we had multiple conversations about it. And we spoke to the attorneys about it. We spoke to our families about this. We spoke to a lot of people in our lives and legal advice on doing this before doing this. And this whole concept came up because it was Pamela's idea as a way to fundraise. And I was like, I like where you're going with this because it resonates with me and my storyline. So I was like, I'm on board with that. So anyway, we go and we do um the first nude shoots for the movement, whatever, and we agreed to that and everything was fine. And it was never ever a problem, not even when she quit the movement, it wasn't a problem. It was not a problem until I was in Texas and I was giving the speech at the I Am Vanessa Guillen protest that was going on. And when I got back from my hotel after it was live streaming everywhere, that was when um all of a sudden I come back, and at that point, like, I had traveled for like 24 hours straight, like I'm tired, whatever. So I'm not checking my phone. And then on top of it, like while I was out there, I was doing work. So like not only did I have that going on, but I was working the entire time I was out there. So like I'm not going through stuff. And I'm not checking my emails. I'm traveling at like nonstop. And then like between Houston, Texas to San Antonio, that was traveling. So like I'm either the whole time I was out there, I was traveling or I was doing work. So I'm not checking my emails. All of a sudden, I land in New York. And when I land in New York, I'm getting screenshots left and right, like tons and tons of screenshots are coming in. And then at that point, it's all stuff that Pamela's posting online saying that she felt that I coerced her into doing nudes, saying that she felt that I was grooming her, and like all this stuff just to smear my name at an opportune time because I refused to pay her legal bills because of her substance abuse habit. So then, and if you look at the date on that, that was literally 6 weeks before I went to 6 weeks before I went to Texas, that whole situation that I just showed you guys, and everything was cool until that day. So she waited till an opportune time to attack, right? And run a smear campaign. So what ended up happening, yeah, and then at that point she's like so I'm coming back to New York, and next thing I know, all these people are like, you're running a sex poll, you're grooming survivors, you're doing this, and I'm like, what the fuck? Like, first of all, like no survivors have posted nude. Like, well, some have done really provocative things, but like not anything like explicit. But like everybody does whatever they want. Like you post or whatever you give us to post. Like I don't censor any of it. And you know, I've always said I don't censor our stories because like how do we know what people really go through if we're censoring who they are, how their sexuality evolves, how their story evolves? Like I'm just not someone who's going to censor what an MST survivor looks like or put it into a box that we're all the same. So diversity of expression is extremely important to me. And like everybody knows this. But I come back and like all of a sudden I'm getting all these screenshots where Pamela's saying that I'm starting a sex cult. The reason she left is because she felt like she was in a sex cult, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what the hell? So like I just didn't entertain it because the reality of it, it was bullshit. And I was like, this is just nonsense. Like this is pure nonsense. And the level of bullshit that I had just dealt with her, I was tired. I was like, I'm tired of just dealing with this shit. So what ends up happening at that point is like I talk to the attorneys about it. The attorneys tell me to issue a very polished statement that they helped me to draft to tell the public like this isn't true, this is false information, and just move on from it and to keep it professional. So I take their advice and I'm like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. And then, you know, people are asking me things and they want me to comment on it. And the attorney strictly advised me not to say anything and comment on it and like not to get involved with it because like even they felt it was fucking stupid because the attorneys were involved. They were involved in this shit happening. So like they knew what happened and they were like, they just felt that she was being petty as fuck. So the attorneys were just like, what the hell? This is bullshit. So they told me keep it professional, move on, don't say anything, whatever. So I was trying to do that. But obviously she kept instigating and instigating and instigating. And then I tried to leave it alone because I also was like, her mental health's not in the right place. So like, let me let this go. Let me let it rock on and let me just move forward with the movement and just keep doing that. And she just kept running smear campaigns and wouldn't shut the fuck up. So I was like, so like one day, oh, and then she kept having people come to my feed. Like then she started having people literally harass me like every fucking day. And all I was doing is I'm not saying shit and I'm sending it to the attorneys. I'm sending it to the attorneys. And finally I got fucking ticked off. So I told her off. And I was like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, stop. Like, stop. Like, this literally is ongoing harassment. I'm not dealing with this. So I was like, just move on. And you know, she felt some type of way about it. And also like she left the movement and the movement just fucking soared. Like all of the problems we were dealing with when she was in the movement just went away and the movement just grew and like we just started doing our thing. So it also affirms to me that her leaving was the right choice. But obviously she has to scream and shout and you know, throw a tantrum and cause this whole thing to happen. So long story short is all of that happens and when this situation then occurs, I'm just moving forward and I'm just ignoring it at this point. Like I said what I had to say. And at that point it was like just move on. And that's how I just went forward, right? Like just doing the movement and taking care of everything. So it gets to that point, it's all good. Then all of a sudden, a couple, like maybe another couple months goes by, and like we're still doing our lobbying for the I Am Vanessa Guillen Act. And what was really weird was a couple organizations were like, "Oh, our mentor doesn't want us working with you," or "Our mentor has concerns about some of the stuff you're doing." And I'm like, "What?" And it was like red flags. And I was like, "Is Pamela their mentor?" Because like I was just like, I'm not getting involved with that. Like if that's who your mentor is, like I'm staying away from 1,000 miles from that shit. I'm not getting involved with that. So, but the stuff that they were saying was alarming. And I'm like, okay, Pamela's doing some smear stuff. But like, if you're working with her, I want nothing to do with that because that's not even red flag. That shit's black fucking flag. So at that point, I'm like, I'm just going to keep the movement going and like do our own thing. Then what ends up happening when we fast forward to the Largo family comes into the picture and there was a mutual volunteer that we had that also was partnered with another organization. Apparently, apparently that volunteer was more involved in the other organization And it was an organization that works with Pamela. So at this point, when we met up with the Largo family and we were talking because they wanted options and they wanted to talk to different organizations and see what they had to offer. um, they were like shopping around for who they wanted to work with and how they wanted to proceed. So what ends up happening is that organization gets upset that the Largo family picked us to work with and not their organization. So obviously, Pamela's working with their organization. And what ends up happening is we had the Largo family come on because the Largo family asked us specifically with certain things that were happening to help them address it, right? Because they were going through a really, really stressful time. So we were helping them to address the situation, and then it was causing drama to ensue. So the Largo family came on and then spoke about how they felt about everything and said who they wanted to work with and told everyone themselves, right? So that was 8 weeks ago, maybe like almost 2 months ago at this point. And that conversation comes out and they talk about how they felt about everything. And even at that point, like I wasn't getting into the political dynamics going on with that organization and Pamela and what's going on with ours. Like there was more pressing issues. Like they have a daughter that's in the brig, you know what I mean, who just went through rape and who just went through sexual violence. And like there's trauma there. And at that point, I was like, I'm just gonna resolve the problem. Like, I'm not dealing with this bullshit. Like, this is bullshit, and there's bigger issues. Then we have another family that comes to us, and now I'm like, whoa, we got way bigger issues to deal with. Not dealing with this bullshit, right? Like, we're fulfilling our mission and our purpose, and that needs to happen. We're not dealing with the politics of this nonsense that's bullshit. So what ends up happening at that point is, we're working on campaigns, things are going. We're quiet about it, right? For the safety of the families. Don't say anything that's going on. And what ends up happening is we get back from DC and all of a sudden these smear campaigns start again. And it's from that organization and it's from Pamela. And now they're reviving the same smear campaign about the movement being a sex cult and the movement grooming people and the movement doing X, Y, and Z. And none of it's true. And now they're deflecting, they're investing their time running smear campaigns instead of solving the issues that are happening with these families. And now they're going to the families and they're saying this nonsense that is not true. And then not only are they saying this stuff that's not true, but now they're going around to a number of organizations continuing this smear campaign. And all of this derived from Pamela's substance abuse issues and the legal fees that she didn't want to pay and stealing someone's money. Like all of that shit, it happens that she's upset about, and now she's turning against the movement and turning it around into something it's not because of the fact that she wants to hurt the movement now. And now she's taking these issues that are happening with these survivors to politicize them, to now try to harm the movement at the same time and harm the families. And like, I'm going to say something because that's disrespectful as fuck. That is disrespectful as fuck to do that while people are in pain. And then at the same time, to take a smear campaign to that level. So like, obviously I had no choice but to come out and say something. Because like the reality of it is like, I don't need to deal with this. And like, I don't personally care about public perception, but now it's harming people outside of the movement and it's harming families that need resources and access to help. And instead of focusing on doing the right thing, and it's like, you really want to be a leader in this space, do the motherfucking work, right? Like, stop running smear campaigns because you're upset about it and trying to get people to turn against the movement. Do the motherfucking work. Help elevate what is happening with these stories. Help propel them to the next level. Help support the families. Whether or not you agree with the movement and what happened, you can still support the cause, right? Whether or not whatever happened with Vanessa Guillen's family, we have gone forward and we decided to take the high road and do the right choice and do the work. And you put everything else aside. So the reality is, there's a time for politics and then there's a time to fight for social justice. And social justice is the highest good. And that always comes first. The mission always comes first. But it's at a point now that like this nonsense is getting so fucking big that like I have to make these statements and I have to make a public statement about it because this behavior is not going to keep going. And the fact that I have to have this conversation is upsetting to me. The fact that I have to have this dialogue because the fact that people are even saying this and the fact that people are spreading this rumor, spreading this nonsense, and not even having a conversation about it with the movement and having it amongst each other. That is disrespectful as fuck. And not only is it disrespectful, but you're perpetuating a lie that is harmful to the entire community. So at the end of the day, you have to look at where your priorities are. Are your priorities to help end MST, or are your priorities politics to get your fucking name ahead? That is not okay. So obviously, I'm not going to sit back and be quiet and let this happen. So I'm at a point that I had no choice but to do this and sit here and have this conversation. This is not something I wanted to do. And if it was something I wanted to do, I would have done this shit months ago. The reality of it is, this was not conducive to anyone. It is not helpful to anyone. So there was no point in focusing on this drama, this nonsense, because that is what it is. However, now it's impacting families. Now it's impacting the survivors. Now it's impacting the movement. So I had no choice but to say something. So the fact that everyone wants to continue perpetuating this, you need to think about where the fuck your priorities are. Like, you really have to think about that. Like, are you here because you want to benefit the movement? Or are you here because you want to make a name for yourself on the backs of other people and what they're doing and other people's trauma? Because at the end of the day, whether or not we disagree on how to achieve a goal, whether or not we disagree on something, we have a mission to fulfill. So it is disrespectful because there's a conflict happening in the background to do such a thing. And also, like, that makes you think, like, how contorted and how unhealthy someone has to be to take something to that level, to do that, to cause that level of harm. So it's like, the reality of it is, I can't sit here and think about what's in her best interest and to help support her and her mental health, because what she's doing is trying to destroy the movement and trying to harm families and trying to make a name for herself over actually caring about what's going on. And I'm not going to let that happen. So it's like, I have to say something, and I'm going to say something, because this is not okay. Nothing about this is okay, and I'm not going to let it slide. So the reality of it is, like, you wanted to play this game, so now you're getting the results of it, so everybody can know what the fuck is up. Because doing this to survivors is not okay. Making shit up is not okay. Like, it's not. And then the fact that you're perpetuating this story and going forward with it, like, it's not okay. Like, in any circumstance whatsoever. So the reality of it is, now everybody knows what's going on. Everyone knows how this happened. I'm not having this conversation again. You want to replay this live, you do that. You want to share it, you do that. I'm not entertaining this anymore, because the reality of it is, people's lives are at stake. There's people who have died. There's people who are committing suicide. There's people that are in the brig right now. And you're asking me to entertain fucking bullshit. So the reality of it is, like, yeah, I'm going to say what I have to say about it, but we're not doing this. And, like, if you're going to be a part of the problem and you're going to continue perpetuating bullshit, you're a part of the problem. So, like, that can't happen. So the reality of it is, like, I'm going to go into the comments to just see who's engaging and what's going on. And then I'm going to wrap up, and we're not talking about this again. You guys know what's going on, so you can have an educated dialogue on what is happening. But I'm not going to sit quiet and let this keep going, because it's not okay. Like, it's not. Oh, there's a whole lot of comments here. This is months and months of garbage. Yeah, I agree with that. This woman, Pamela, is much more about her than helping the movement and victims and everyone else. Yeah, well, I'm glad that the message is getting across. I'll never take care of a drunk again either. I don't blame you. Yeah, so that's another mistake that I made. And you know what's crazy about that is, I made that mistake 3 fucking times. I had 3 different survivors here, women who were struggling with different things that were all MST survivors. And like this is a boundary that I had to set. Like I wanted to be a safe haven. Like when I first started the movement, I wanted to be able to offer whatever I could because I know what it's like to go through MST and all the obstacles that happen. So like when I first started the movement, one of the mistakes I made was taking in women who were struggling, like with housing and homelessness. And I did that 3 times. So Pamela was the third one. And the other people was more short-term stays or like they needed a shower, needed some food, needed a place to stay for a night or two, needed a place to stay for like a month, whatever. And the theme that I realized was every single one of them had severe substance abuse issues, severe substance abuse issues. However, the worst that I dealt with was on time number 3. So it was like I went through that 3 times and like I really just was like, this is the community. But like I wanted to open my heart and open my home and give whatever I could to the community. And I had to learn that like that's not my responsibility. That's not my job. We're a political organization. And like I had to realize where our strengths lie and where they end. And the reality of it is like I can't offer my home to people where I'm not feeling safe, where I'm not feeling healthy and I'm not feeling up to par because if I can't lead the movement, then there is no movement. So the reality of it is like I had to learn that like doctors need to take care of people with those types of issues. Like the movement can educate the public about it, the movement can help create awareness and advocacy, but like I can't deal with that on a personal level. I'm not a doctor. I don't have a PhD in this. Like, and I also just don't have the tolerance for it because I have PTSD. So like I had to learn to like where the beginning of the movement starts and ends. And like that's also why there was a great part of the movement where like people were always like, well, do you care about this? And are you like helping survivors? And like, why are you doing this? And I'm like, we're not a therapeutic organization, right? Like we're a political organization because I had to not only set that boundary for the movement, but I had to set that boundary for myself because a lot of times survivors like the amount of homelessness, the amount of substance abuse, like we have a highly vulnerable, disenfranchised community. So like obviously I want to help everyone I can. I want to give as much as I can. And the reality is like I had to realize that like the strengths of the movement lie and end at certain places, and my strengths and um my boundaries, where they start and where they end. So like I made that mistake a couple times before I learned the lesson. Like that's also part of learning, right? Like you you got to go through those losses and like those points of hardship to learn. So that has been that kind of experience for me, and like it wasn't a fun ride. It hasn't been a fun ride. Do the nude photo shoot or else, yeah, right. Well, yeah, and so that's what's really disappointing to me because the reality of it is like when it came to the like everything going on, we have attorneys. Like we have attorneys. Everybody knows this. So like why would you think I would go forward without talking to our attorneys? And also to do something like that that's risky, like obviously she was involved in the conversation. So like and we had multiple conversations about this multiple times. So like no, it was not a situation like that. It was not a situation like that at all. She's trying to claim Janelle the movement is a sex cult and re-victimize the survivors when this whole thing was started by her own idea. Right. So that's why I'm saying all of this. And her motivation, that's a propaganda campaign and a smear campaign because of the backstory that I just told you. So like she's just trying to make herself look good and she's upset that she left the movement and the movement's doing better without her. And like she's not doing what she wants to do. So like she wants revenge or whatever, and I don't know on what. You know what I mean? And that's a red flag. Those are red flags. Like I once reached out to Pamela privately. She wouldn't reply and blocked me, but she will publicly put it out with no problem, but will never answer in a private conversation. Unfortunately, these other movements don't have the strength or the infrastructure to deal with the real issues beyond let's do little march with nobody showing up. They can't lobby, they can't organize. So let's all band together and take down the real movement that's able to actually enact change. put these other movements on blast because they're garbage and they're going to hurt people instead of help. With so much of this issue finally hitting national news and circuit, we must administer. I don't know if I can see more of this. I can't see the rest of that. I'm lost with the pictures. I need to catch up. I was following her, but she's too much. Yeah. So like, well, everything you guys are saying, everything you're saying is like, this is what I'm trying to tell you. I've been dealing with this behind the scenes, but like there was no need for me to come out publicly and have this conversation, right? Like I don't feel like this benefited anyone. I felt like it was just drama, and I felt like she was throwing a tantrum, and I felt like her mental health was just not in the right place. So I literally just tried to move on from this. But now that it's hurting everybody involved, this has to happen. So like, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't want to do this, but I'm at a point that I don't have a choice because I have tried to deal with this situation every other way. And at this point, this is the way that it's getting dealt with because this is not going to be the narrative and this is not going to go forward. So now everyone's going to know what's up. Everyone's going to know what the facts are and how all of this transpired. The movement did a legitimate nude photo shoot. Pamela signed releases, and then I don't know what. Right, right. And we had attorneys involved in this. This was not an overnight thing. Like this was just not like coming out my asshole. If all she did was smear campaigns negative towards you, then she doesn't have much. Right. So this is the thing. Like now she's trying to get other organizations involved, and she's telling them to smear campaigns, and now these people are all believing it. So the thing is, like at this point, I had no choice but to out why she's doing this and communicate with everyone on why this is happening. Because the reality of it is like it's just fucking nonsense. It's like super nonsense. Well, that's nonsense too, that comment. I don't even know what that means. All right, so I'm gonna jump off here. I had my 1 hour rant about what's going on. Everyone knows what's going on. I'm not gonna keep reiterating this. We have important work to do. However, if you want to believe what you want to believe and you want to believe the nonsense, you do that. But you're not being part of the solution, right? Being part of the solution is one, not engaging in bullshit like that, not engaging in nonsense like that. And also, you need to know when to deal with your bullshit and when not to, and like not to do shit like that, like shit that's severely harmful. Like it's harmful to survivors, it's harmful to the families enduring these traumas, it's harmful to the people that we're trying to help. All of that, and none of this is positive. This is all negativity, and the fact that the constant negativity surrounds one person all the time. And it's like on top of it, like she left the movement and here we are months later dealing with her negativity. And like that's what I feel so problematic. Like we have done monumental things this year. We have made monumental advancements this year. We made monumental actions last year. Like we're taking action, we're affecting change, and we're doing a lot of things that other organizations just they can't do. So it's like, why are you choosing to harm everyone for the sake of your own self-preservation and projection, and because you're upset that you failed? Like failure happens, it's a part of learning. Like no one's perfect, all of us make mistakes. Like I just told you about like 20 different mistakes that I made along the way that I have learned now. And also like the movement has evolved and changed and advanced. MSTM has done nothing but advocate the proof right, and we've been effective. We've been effective at legislation. We've been effective at lobbying. We've been effective at demonstrations. We've been effective at awareness campaigns. We have been effective at everything that we do. And I do want to say we have amazing volunteers who put effort on every day. We have great people in the organization. We have phenomenal people, and a lot of what we've dealt with is growing pains and things that I have had to learn from and I have had to develop from. I totally appreciate that. And I would, I'd love to have you in the movement. Yeah, so like, this just had to come out, and I hope that that clarifies everything that's been going on the last couple months. I apologize for not saying something earlier. I apologize for not coming out and just being open about this in the beginning. Again, hindsight is 2020, and I really wish that I just had this conversation a lot earlier. It wasn't that I wasn't trying not to have it. It was just that at the advice of council, it was not to go forward with it. And we had so many other projects going on that were more important, to be honest. However, like, this is problematic at this point, and because of the level of problematic that it is, it's something that has to be addressed. So, everyone have a good and great night. Make healthy choices. Make healthy choices. Do something that makes a difference. Do something that helps survivors. Like, we have so many good things going on. Lobbying activities, demonstration, advocacy. We have a groundbreaking survey and research project that's coming out. Like, scroll down on our page. Take a 10-minute survey that's going to change the way therapy and occupational therapy works for survivors. Like, do something that's productive. The gossiping back and forth online, the public shaming, the nonsense and the drama, all it's doing is tearing our community apart. And the reality of it is, but the more that we break, the less that we're going to be able to succeed. So the reality of it is, like, there's choices that all of us have to make right now. And we have to also determine what our priorities are. So if our priorities are to end MST and to make a difference, then that needs to be at the forefront of everything that we're doing. And for that to happen, we have to think about what each one of us is doing. Are we engaging in nonsense and bullshit, or are we taking the actions to affect change? And like, every single one of us, I think, walking away from this conversation, that's what we need to think about. And that's what we need to look at in terms of how we're going to move forward. Because the drama and the bullshit and the nonsense, it's not serving anyone. It's not serving the community. It's not serving anyone that we're trying to help. It's not helping the cause. Like, it's literally all nonsense. So, every single one of us has a responsibility to think about what we're going to do to address the problem. And each one of us has a value to add. So, like, if we're going to make good choices, are we fighting to end MST, or are we gonna keep fighting with each other and keep doing this nonsense? So, like, we have to think about those things. So I hope that everyone, takes the time to really think about everything, let it settle in, and for everyone to really think about, where you want to see things go next, and whether or not you want to be part of the problem or part of the solution. So, I hope everyone has a great night. And, I really hope that everyone enjoys their night. I'm sorry that I had to have this kind of live. I'm sorry that I even had to have this conversation. This is not something that I want to do. Like, this is not something that I'd ever want to do. And I hope they never have to do this again. However, this was a needed conversation. All right. So everyone, have a good night.